Okay, hello, Honors Algebra 2, Progress Check Review workers. First video, we're going to talk what even and odd is. If you came to one of the office hours, you might not need to do this because we already did this, but let's get one out there for everybody just in case you can't make the office hours, even and odd functions. So even and odd are classifications of symmetry. I vote we start with even, and then we'll talk about what an odd function is, and then that should help you do lots and lots and lots of problems on the progress check review. So, even first. So, even functions means you're symmetric with the y-axis. So even functions are functions that have symmetry with respect to the y-axis. So a couple of common even functions are things like y equals x squared, just the regular old parabola. Other super important even functions for you guys with the units we've been covering recently are f of x equals 1 over x squared. So you should be able to see that these guys have symmetry with respect to the y-axis. And then the other big important even function that we've talked about recently is f of x equals cosine x. Cosine kind of looks like this. But the other side looks exactly the same. So cosine is also a function that is symmetric with the y-axis. So basically that's the deal with even functions. Even functions are functions that have y-axis symmetry. That's it. That's the whole thing. So let's talk odd functions. So an odd function So there it is. There's the definition. Odd functions are functions that are symmetric with respect to a 180-degree rotation around the origin, aka 0, 0 on your sort of coordinate plane. So where the x-axis and y-axis cross, that's the origin. You're spinning around that point. So super important odd functions that you've learned recently are this function, y equals 1 over x. Spin it around that little red circle. That part will sync up with that. That part will sync up with that. So just rotate this thing around 180 degrees, and we should be all lined up. F of x equals sine x. Is another one. Sine of x is a function that you can spin around 180 degrees around that spot, and it'll just sync back up with itself. You can check it for yourself. And tan of x is another one. Tan of x is another odd function. Now, for some people, odd functions, this is fine. Spin it around 180 degrees. It should sync up back by itself. So just take your paper, spin it around. It should look exactly the same. What I like to do with an odd function is say we start with 1 over x. That graph, just again. If I just take that graph and flip it down here. Flip this part down here, so flip it over the x-axis. And take that part and flip it up here. And flip it over the x-axis. That's what I did. I flipped it over the x-axis. Except the same thing would happen if I took that part and flipped it over the y-axis and that part and flipped it over the y-axis. I like to think of an odd function as an x-axis reflection is equal to a y-axis reflection. So alternative way, which might be easier for you to check real fast, especially for these functions that just repeat themselves over and over and over again, like tangent or sine, I think the easier move is to just flip it over the x-axis and flip it over the y-axis. And if those are the same thing, then that function's odd. So just a graphical look at even and odd. These questions should, or hopefully this video helps you do questions like the bottom boxes in problem 1 from the progress check review, as well as the last set of questions 18 through 26. My advice on some of those last couple of questions, which says, if you change the amplitude of cosine, is it still even? If you change the period of sine, is it still odd? All you have to do, or my advice, would just be to draw one. So my advice on doing those problems are, here's what cosine looks like. Its amplitude is normally 1. Change its amplitude. And then you tell me if it's even or odd. So just make it bounce up higher. Is it still even? So you tell me. If it's still even, then you answered your own question. If it's not even anymore, then you also answered the question. So my advice for doing those last couple of questions is draw some pictures. That's it.